All right, ready for these three service models. Now, these are probably things you've seen, read about before, these little as-a-service kinds of things. And there are lots and lots of as-a-service models that we're starting to see get developed. But these are the three basic as-a-service kinds of models. First is infrastructure as a service. Now, the infrastructure, IT infrastructure, just by definition, are things like servers and storage devices and the networks that connect them all together. All the things that make up an IT department can be provided, that infrastructure can be provided by a hosting company as a service. In other words, instead of buying all of that stuff, they're going to allow you to use it for a monthly fee. Now, that infrastructure is going to come along as a service, but when you buy infrastructure as a service, you also get along with that the air conditioning that it takes to make that system work. Think about it. And so if I take a server out of my IT room and get rid of it, and now I'm buying that same server as a service from the cloud, then I no longer have to provide cooling for that thing. I no longer have to provide power or service for that server that's no longer in my building. Someone else is responsible for that. And so that's what hosting companies do. They provide the cooling for the server, they provide the power for the server, they provide physical and data security. Physical security means that the physical building, absolutely the most secure place you've ever seen. And so you'd think that there's rocket science going on in there. Lots of different layers of security because they just don't want anybody walking in there. Physical security. Also data security. We hear a lot about data breaches and people hacking into people's network and stealing a bunch of credit card numbers. That's dramatically common these days. But the fact is that these data centers are the most secure places on the planet. They have the highest levels of data security. It would be extremely difficult to breach. They give you great network access. So these hosting facilities have big pipes to the outside world and lots of connectivity. And so when you buy infrastructure as a service, don't think I'm just getting to use someone's server. There's a whole lot of other things that go along with that. You'll hear them sometimes call it ping, power, and pipe. That's infrastructure as a service. In the lower right, you'll see that's pretty much the domain of network engineers. Network engineers are going to be ones talking about acquiring infrastructure as a service. Next comes platform as a service, and it sits right on top of infrastructure. If you were developing an application, a big application for your business to run, and it's going to be delivered as a cloud service, you're going to want to go ahead and get with your infrastructure all of the platform-related things that are necessary to develop and run the application. Things like operating systems and middleware and web services, database services, a lot of different things that are necessary to actually make an application work. And so you can purchase that as a service from the same cloud provider. And for instance, if you were building an application that was more CRM oriented, building a CRM application around Salesforce.com, you might use Salesforce's platform as a service. Or if you're building an application that was sort of maps oriented or location based, Google would have a platform that might make sense because they're big in maps. And there are others. So Microsoft is called Azure, and there's a whole group, an open source group called OpenStack. And so that's the platform as a service that you can buy as a service along with your infrastructure. Now, once the application's built, it's delivered SaaS, or software as a service. And software as a service is just standard applications that are running remotely. You're probably accessing them through a browser. And it's common things like Gmail and Google Apps and Microsoft Office 365. There are a lot of different examples here of just software as a service. Salesforce.com's been around a dozen or more years, and so it's really not a brand new kind of thing. So those are the three service models for cloud services. Next is deployment models. Now, so what I've done is I've put our little diagram in the bottom right-hand corner there, so that you can see, as we talk about these deployment models, you can sort of see where they live in that hosting landscape. And so first we'll talk about private cloud. Private cloud is cloud resources that are on premises or co-located, okay? And you'll see the little circle that I put down there on the diagram. Private cloud is built and operated in your own private data centers. And the reason we call it private cloud instead of just IT room is because it's using virtualized technology. And we're going to talk about virtualization in just a second. Now, there's a private cloud that's physically on your premises. There's also something I have to mention called virtual private cloud. and it's in that sort of upper left quadrant of the hosting solution. And you may hear them refer to, oh, we can provide you with a virtual private cloud. And so all they're saying there is it's dedicated resources, you're going to manage them, and it's a bit custom. And so that's a virtual private cloud that's hosted or managed by the hosting company. Now we're still talking about private cloud. We have to talk about virtualization for just a minute. It's an important concept. This is one of the key things. Virtualization is one of the key sciences that all converged all at once that have really made cloud computing even possible. Virtualization, you'll see on the left-hand side of that little picture there, this diagram of a traditional data center. You'll see this rack with 5 servers in there, 5 servers running 5 applications. That's the traditional way to do it. And so what these guys discovered was most servers in a business operation was somewhere between 5 and 9% utilized. Think about that. This is a multi-$1,000 computer that you're only using less than 10% of it. And so a company called VMware, they were the sort of the initiators of a lot of this stuff. They kind of reinvented an old technology, is really what they did. The ability to take one computer and time slice it up to allow multiple applications to all run at the same time. And now you wind up with something called virtualized servers, and that's what the virtualized data center on the right looks like. So instead of having 5 servers running 5 applications, you have 1 server running those same 5 applications. And it just time slices. And you may see terms like virtual server. Well, how many virtual servers? I have 1 actual server, 5 virtual servers. Or you may see the word VM or virtual machine. I have 5 VMs here. And it's all made possible by something called a hypervisor. That's the software that VMware is so famous for. Of course, there are others now. There are other companies that do hypervisors as well. But it's the piece of software that allows me now to have virtual servers all running inside of 1 physical server. You may see the word multi-tenant. And so multi-tenant basically says I've got one big instance of software running on a server, but I have multiple companies that are all using that one piece of software, and each one of them thinks that they're only person using it. And so you see here we have the ability now to share IT resources among multiple users. That's virtualization. So let's set that aside for just a minute. That's what makes private cloud possible. For instance, a company might have 100 servers and you virtualize them, and now you maybe only have 20 servers doing exactly the same thing that the 100 servers used to be. And if those servers are on-prem, you have a private cloud. Next is community cloud. This is kind of simple, but if you had multiple people, multiple companies, all who have a shared kind of reason to buy cloud resources, they get together and they sort of group buy. And this is a model that's still emerging, community cloud. I really want to talk about public cloud. These are the 2 important, private and public. The public cloud, you'll see, is that bottom right-hand quadrant down there from the hosting company, provided by hosting companies. It's shared infrastructure, and it's accessible primarily over the public internet. And so that's the public cloud that we've heard some about. Of course, the 4th is hybrid, and it's by far the most common implementation of cloud, where you have some mixture of on-premises, colo, and hosted. 5 essential attributes. Listen, these are the things that make the cloud what it is. And without these things, I doubt we would have what we have today as the cloud. The first thing you really need to know about cloud computing is that one of the real promises of cloud computing is this notion of on-demand self-service. Let me give you an example of this. And so in the traditional model, the older model, the boss says, we're going to buy this piece of software. We just bought it and paid for it. It's a lot of money. Now, you IT guys, go and make it work here. And so the IT department takes the software, they read the manual, study it very carefully, realize what it's going to take to run this thing. We're going to need a server like this and some more storage. We're going to need this application, this operating system, this middleware, this database. They buy all that stuff from different places. It all comes in at different times. Comes in, they start to take it out of the boxes, and they're loading the operating systems and loading the software and racking and stacking everything together. They put it all together, they load the software up, they get it configured, they go back to the boss 2 weeks later and say, okay, boss, we got it ready to go, what do you want to do? That's the traditional model. Under the new cloud model, here's how that might work. The boss says, look, we just bought the cloud version of this piece of software, make it work. And the 5 IT guys go into the back room, and one of them says, look, you other 4, I got it. And he sits down at a portal, a web portal, online, for that piece of software and for the hosting company now where he's going to host it. And he clicks a few buttons and fills in a few blanks and quantifies it a little bit. We're going to need 20 of these and 10 of those. And then he gets it ready to go, and he says, I'm ready to buy, and gives them a way to pay for it. And then 2 hours later, 2 hours after the boss gave him the job, he comes back and says, okay, we got it ready to go. What do I do? Now listen, that's hyperbole, and it's sort of an exaggerated example. But you'll see here that explains what I call on-demand self-service. I get IT resources when I want them, without much waiting. I can do it myself. I can provision computing capabilities as needed. That's the primary key, essential attribute of cloud computing. Here's another one, is broad network access. That really means that the assumption is that everyone who needs cloud computing, and that's just about everyone, small businesses, large businesses, that anyone who needs it, first of all, has access to a very fast data connection, at least for the internet, and that it's persistent. That means that it doesn't go down much. There was a time when the internet was unreliable. It was slow and it went down a lot. And of course, in those days, cloud computing really didn't exist, and that's because of this lack of a broad network access. But today, just about everyone, in fact, it's the assumption that you can have a fast and persistent network connectivity. That's an assumption of cloud computing. Third thing, resource pooling and sharing. We talked about virtualization. Very critical here. And so one of the absolute essential attributes of cloud computing is that we can have servers and storage devices that are shared. Shared virtualization, multi-tenancy, this notion of load balancing, all of these are things that cloud computing providers do, and that's how they do it. But they make the assumption that they're going to be able to take a particular device and share it among multiple users. This is what makes cloud computing affordable for the user and profitable for the cloud hosting company. Fourth thing is rapid elasticity. It just simply means that my IT resources can stretch or contract as needed. An example might be this. You have a company who sells products from an internet site and also with a call center. They have 20 people in their call center, and that's what they do during the year. But, back to school or Christmas time, they need more people. And so they bring in, 10 new call agents and sit them down at their phone systems. And so what they do at that point, they're actually sort of able to sort of dial up their IT resources. Instead of saying now, instead of a 20-person call center, now we have 30. And they just change 20 to 30, and now it's on just like that. And they double their capacity for their website, and they get themselves through back to school for Christmas. And now in January, they say to those 10 people, thanks, see you next year. They dial it back from 30 back to 20. Dial their infrastructure and platform back to where they usually use it, and for the rest of the year. And you can change your IT resources based on your IT demand, and you only pay for what you use. Expand and scale your technology consumption at will. Of course, there's then measured service, which says you pay for what you use. You're going to pay for your IT resources, perhaps out of a different budget. You're going to pay for it as an operational expense, the way you pay your power bill or something. And it's recurring, it's predictable. And I'll go ahead and introduce here this notion of CapEx and OpEx. So capital expense, a CapEx expense, means that you pay for it all up front, right? Here's the big check, write it, I got it, I own it. OpEx means that it's an operational expense. It means that I pay for it as I need it, so to speak. It's paid for usually monthly. And sometimes you have to get a different kind of a resource. Instead of, just the CIO making a decision about buying some product, now the CFO may have to step in. And because, you're purchasing IT resources from a different budget, maybe from an operational expense budget. And so you'll see here that measured service is the promise that allows me now, that gives me a way to pay for IT resources with a different methodology. And so now companies who maybe couldn't afford that big ticket item up front have an alternative way to buy that big ticket item by paying for it over time.